Hello, hello, welcome everyone. First, as always, I hope you can hear and see me well and everything works correctly. I'm very, very excited to be live again in our group with another episode of our new series, Ask Me Divi. Okay, so it's lovely to see you in the chat. Hi, Louise. Hi, Misha. It's so great to see you, and thanks, Misha. I'm glad everything is working. Hi, Robert. Hi, Javier. I can see some of my students. Gabi, Deshna is here. I saw you. Okay, so if we haven't met before, just a quick introduction. My name is Ania Romańska. For the past few years, I've been sharing various tutorials and resources created specifically for WordPress and Divi users. I am the author of the Divi Lover website and the Divi Toolbox plugin. But I've also been focused on teaching all I know about Divi, CSS, and web design in general inside my Divi Stylist Academy program, and our live Q&A sessions inside the Academy was sort of inspiration for what I'm doing right now. So thank you very much for joining me. And if you are live here with me right now, please leave a comment. Let me know where are you joining me from. I can see. Okay, so yeah, another thing. Just a quick housekeeping note. If it's the first time you're joining me live, there is a link in the video description. Please click it to allow Ecamm, the software I'm using for live streaming, to see your to use your name and profile picture, because otherwise I just see your mystery Facebook user. Hello, hello. We are in a private group, so in order for me to see your name when you're writing a comment, I need your permission. And you would only need to do it once for any future live. So yeah, thank you. Okay, now, hi Brett. Brett is joining us from USA, Colorado. It's probably like 10 a.m. for you. It's 6 p.m. here in Poland. So I hope that covers like most of the time zones. Sorry for our friends in Australia. It's not possible to make the time that works for everyone. But yeah, it's lovely to see all of you. Okay, so today's topic for today's episode is Divi Header and Menu. That was the topic that got the most votes in our little poll inside the group. So I think that should be interesting. Oh, that's so thanks. There's like 15 seconds delay or so. So I do love to see your comments commenting. Louis is joining us from London. Robert is from Croatia. So really international crowd. It's like really, it never stops to amaze me, like our international community, right? So thank you so much for being here with me. Now, just one last thing. If you are watching this on YouTube, it is a replay, and I invite you to join our group and catch the next episode live, because it is so fun. Okay, so I will be sharing my screen to answer your questions, and I will try to monitor the comments here as we go. So if you have anything to add or have a question, please let me know, and I will try to answer the best I can. Hi, it's great to see so many of you joining us. Okay, again, the topic of today's episode is Divi Header and Menu, but let me start with a few questions I got last time and didn't answer. And the first question, first question is from Gary, and Gary says, I've used Divi for several banned sites on which I have number of videos, but I want to put the current ones at the top. It is really hard to move them around. Is there an easier way? Let me share my screen with you. Hopefully that will work. Okay, so I have a sample longish, maybe not that long page, because I definitely know that pain when you're working on very long content in the builder. Like if you have 20 or more sections for long pages, it tends to get pretty well, maybe not slow, but slower. Definitely you notice the difference when working on long page in relation to working with just a few sections. So one thing that helps is switching to wireframe mode. Right here you have the toolbar, and that little icon gives you that preview, and then moving things around here, it's much easier than on actual page preview. And also keep in mind that you can easily rename all your items here. So if you do that as you go, that makes it super easy to know which videos are which, and then reorganize it later, just if you change the name of your rows, or just a video module like this, right? You can just type it here, and that what you type here is the same. I'm sure you know that the admin label, which you can fill while you're inside that module. So if you are kind of doing it as you go, then all your modules will have proper name that makes sense to you. And then rearranging it here in the wireframe mode should make it a bit easier. If not that, another thing that I tend to do when trying to move the content on long page is working with layers palette, with Divi builder layers. And one way to access it, it's right here, the icon, this one, or you can click, right click and choose go to layer, or also a keyboard shortcut, Control L. That gives you that layers panel, and here you have a similar overview of all your sections. So if they are named, that would make it that even easier to move things around like this. Okay, so these are like simple things that should help when trying to work with a lot of content in Divi. But since you mentioned videos, I wanted to give you a different idea, a different approach maybe, because that may not be so obvious as these two tips right here. So you could use posts and set up a post for each, I don't know, is it you send band sites and the video. So if there is a reason, or if that makes sense for each video to have its own post, maybe just, add a few words describing the video would be enough. But then let me show you. This is, you might recognize it, this is a website that I've built live here inside our group. Web Design Playground was the series of live streams we did last year. So here on each post, inside each post, let me show you. Okay, so just if we go to view a single post here, let's use this one. So inside all I have is a video and then some description, right? And if on that post edit page, if we choose post format to be video, then Divi will display the first video thumbnail as a featured image. So here on my homepage, I have 3 videos, and these are that section is using a blog module that that has no title, no elements are visible. Actually, I can show you this. So we only enabled featured image for that blog module. Let's see. I haven't been here in a while. I just opened that first time in a year, I think. Okay, so here in the module settings, underneath content, we have elements, and I only have featured image. Everything else is disabled. That's why there's no title, no read more button, and so on. So this is a way to display your videos, and each time you add a new post with a new video, it will, work as a blog module. So new ones will be displayed first, and so on. So that's one idea. That would also work on on your archives with obviously, like here we have a default category or archive page, and instead of featured image, it shows me that video right here. I can click play and it will play, right? It's not like it's just a preview, so all the videos are accessible from the blog list level. Maybe that's a better approach. You wouldn't need to move your video modules around. Okay, so that's not really about a header or menu in Divi, but I hope it was helpful, Gary. I have one more question that's not on topic, but I just wanted to quickly share a few notes with Philip, who I know is not joining us live because he doesn't use Facebook, but I know he'll be watching YouTube replay, so hello in the future. And Philip asked me if I can share some thoughts on how we could recreate the scrolling effects on Apple website. So Apple website obviously is always a great example of web design, basically. So they are using some very advanced scrolling effects. And there are two JavaScript libraries, or basically JavaScript code, well, library is a good name, I guess, that kind of could help achieve something like that. One is called Scrollorama, and as you can see on the demo page, you can do many different things with it. And the second script is called Scroll Magic, and there's loads of tutorials on both of these scripts. The comparison, people comparing the two, what are the differences. Basically, you would need to get familiar with one of these, or maybe a different one, and hand code things, all the sections and everything with use of JavaScript. There is no way to achieve something like the Apple level website with Divi scroll effects, I'm afraid. And as much as I love Divi and I think it's a great page builder, I don't think that would be a best choice to try to recreate something like that in Divi. There would be more fighting against default Divi settings more than actually building that, because you would need to build it from scratch. So building it in a empty, clean environment would be easier than inside a page builder that already has some, different elements, different scrolling effects, and the scripts that work on scroll and so on. So I'm afraid there is no quick solution and easy way to recreate something like that. But working with scripts like this should be helpful, and I'm sure there's extensive documentation on how to use it. So yeah, that would be my recommendation. Okay, so these are all the questions that are not on topic. And let's move on and let's talk about Divi Header and Menu. I know that there's a lot of controversy maybe around that there's limited customization options in Divi for our headers and so on. So sure, Edgar. Yes, I can't do it right now, but I will. Well, basically, you would also have a replay of that live, and we always try to write a blog post summarizing all the questions, so that will be included there as well. If you just Google Scrollorama and Scroll Magic, that would be, Google is a friend, someone says. Yeah, that's just a first Google result for the name of the scripts. Anyway, header and menu. And a question I got from Michelle. Well, basically, Michelle was wondering whether we should stick with the default Divi navigation, or is it better to use the theme builder and design use the menu module basically for our header. And I don't think there is a straight answer, because I do believe that having a simple default navigation will there are types of clients that don't need all the bells and whistles, all the advanced call to actions maybe, or basically simple websites could benefit from a simple Divi navigation. There are a few things you would want to know of when working with default. Like, obviously you've been here before, you know what customization options we have. We can in the theme customizer, we can basically okay, let me make myself a bit smaller. Under header and navigation, we can choose like the height of the logo, the height of the navigation itself, change our fonts, font colors, and that's it. So yeah, pretty limiting, but also sometimes that's all you need really. And with a simple CSS, you can customize it to be a bit more than what's the default. While if you decide to use the theme builder, as easy as it sounds, like using the builder to design, there are a lot of things in play that, it sometimes takes a lot of time to actually make your header and navigation pixel perfect if you are using Divi modules. So for a quick build, easy sites, I would still stick with the default navigation and just a few CSS snippets to make it a bit prettier. But if it needs more, or if I know that I will have different type of headers on different pages, then a theme builder is obviously much more powerful. Now, I know that's like there's no straight answer. Well, Divi developers will try to move away from the theme customizer in the future, I think. So, so yes, working with Divi Builder for creating headers is definitely something we need to be familiar with, right? But it doesn't mean that it's always the best way to build a header on your site. Now, the second question will require a bit more, like a bit longer walkthrough, because Gigi, I'm not sure, Gigi asked me how to add a call to action, like what's the best approach to display a call to action button inside your navigation. But I didn't have, I don't know if we are talking about default navigation or theme builder, like menu module. So I will try to discuss both scenarios. So let's look at our default navigation first, okay? If I were to add a little button here at the end, like make one of my menu links a button, basically that's how call to action looks, right? We see it many times. It is great for linking to a page that is the most important, the action that we want our user to take. We would have like the usual about services something, and then contact us, or get a quote, something like that. Would use a bit different style that grabs that attention. Okay, so first, to be able to target one specific menu item, we first I am going to use CSS. There's no like switch that turn this into a button. It's not that easy. So with CSS, we could use an nth child selector, like target the last element, but I think the safer approach would be to add a CSS class to my menu. So under appearance menus, this is my menu that I assigned as the primary menu for that site. And if we click on the screen options here, just right behind me, there is a checkbox with CSS classes. So make sure to enable that, and then each of the menu items will have a field to add your own CSS class. Okay, so let's use that, and let's add a CTA link CSS class to that last post hello world link in my menu. Okay, so if I save that now, and let's go back here. Now, right-click, inspect. I will be doing that a lot to show you. We'll be working in the Chrome inspector. So now let's see what's the HTML structure, like where is that CSS class. So here is our UL unordered list with ID top menu. That's the default Divi navigation. And each menu item is a list item, and the one with, well, when my class is added to one of the lists, like the so it's not on the link itself, because href, that's the link that's inside my the thing that I'm clicking is the A element, but the class is not added to the link itself, but to the parent, to the list item. So to target that, the simplest approach would be to use a class CTA link, and then A is what we are targeting, and you know, the CTA link is a class of a parent element. Anytime we use a space in our CSS selectors is when we're defining the parent-children relationship. So from the top level elements to the thing that we are selecting, at the end will always be the thing that we are selecting. I want to select my link, but only the link that's inside a class of CTA link. Now, to make this even more future-proof, I only want to target the first link, because if that would be that CTA link class would be added to a menu that has submenus, I would be targeting all links, all A elements inside that class. I don't want to do that, so to only target the first level link, we can use caret symbol, and it does what I just said. So it will only target the first level A element inside that li. And now let's try to change the background. Okay, so background light blue. Okay, now the background stretches because that's the size of that A element. There is like a lot of bottom padding added here, so we could try to fix it with a different padding value. So padding, let's add a bit more at the top and bottom. That would be the first value, let's say 10 pixels, and then right and left we could use 15 pixels. It seems that it worked, but not exactly. Like, let me just click away and back, and now this is the CSS I wrote here, but if you look here, the padding bottom is crossed out, meaning that that property is being overwritten, and some other CSS is overwriting my property. And you know, the quickest way would be to add important, and it would work, but it's not. I'm not going to go this way. Anytime you can avoid using importance in your CSS, I would recommend you do so. So how do we check what is overwriting it? Well, I can see it right here, but if we wouldn't like spot it right away, a different property that's adding a different bottom padding value, we can look here on the side. If you don't see that panel, it's that little icon here toggles this back and forth. So here we have all CSS property listed alphabetically. And we're looking for bottom padding, so padding bottom, right? And now if I click that little arrow here, that will give me all different CSS properties that are trying to change the padding of that element. So I have my 10 pixel, that's the CSS I wrote, but I can see that the first one listed is a different selector, and if I click that little arrow, this gets highlighted. Okay, so as I mentioned, I spotted it right away. So many times you won't need to look here on your properties list, but that's the that's the way how to find what is overwriting your CSS. Now, to understand why this CSS rule set works, like why this padding bottom works and why mine doesn't, we would need to understand CSS specificity hierarchy. It all comes down to classes and IDs. Classes, IDs will always, like using ID in your selector CSS ID instead of the class will always override any number of classes you use. And here we can see that that selector uses, let's make this a bit bigger, uses ID, ET top navigation, and ET header style left CSS class, and also 4 different tag names, like nav is a tag, UL, li, and a. So we have specificity value of 1, 1, and 3, while we are using only an element and a class. So it's like kind of like 11, right? So basically, this is more specific because it uses ID. So to make sure that our padding works, we also need an ID here. So let's say we can, like, to decide which ID we want to use. We can even use the same selector like the CSS they are using. So instead of our CTA link A, let me open, that's the temporary inspector style sheet, and let's change that. So this is the link that the selector that Divi uses to add that padding bottom. But if I only want to target list with that class, sorry, let me clean that up. Okay, now what I did, I copied the same selector they are using, but I added that CTA link class to the list item, and now both background and padding properties work. But notice, if we go back here, if I change that padding for a moment, notice how that whole navigation shifts to the bottom, right? So that is because we've added that top padding, and other menu items don't have the padding. So to make room for it, we could use a negative margin. So margin top, negative 10 pixel. That moves it back where it was. We can also add a border radius so that it looks more like a button. Let's go with 30 pixels. That will make it rounded. We could, change the color, although let's see if that would work. Let's say I want this to be white. Okay, that worked. So whenever you're writing a CSS, you would see here if it works. If it doesn't, then you would need to see what other CSS properties are overwriting what you just wrote. Okay, so this is a great start for that default navigation. And let's try, because one thing you have to remember when working with default navigation, actually there's a few, but just a few that comes to mind. All links on hover have decreased opacity. So if let me just close that for a moment. As I hover over it, I'm not sure how well you can see it, but I'm sure you've seen it on your own sites. Like as you hover, the color is no longer the color that we've selected. The opacity decreases. So if we would want to back here, I would want to change that color on hover, I would use the same selector and then a hover, background light salmon, that's orange-ish, and opacity 1. Okay, so just going back here so I can hover. Now the color is actually the color I've chosen, because let me just show you this. I can enable hover state here on my link so that it looks like I would hover it, and then I can see the CSS properties that are affecting the hover state. And you see here there is top menu nav, UL list item A hover. On hover, by default the opacity changes to 0.7, 70%. So by changing it back to 1, we make sure that this is the color that we see. The color we chose is the color we see. There's no opacity change. Okay, so let's try to, okay, first let me copy the CSS I wrote, and I will place that, I have a child theme here installed, so I will add that to my style sheet. Okay, you can add, you know, that's not the adding where to add your CSS. I recently recorded a long video, well, not that long, but long explanation on where you can add your CSS and Divi, and your CSS style sheet is one of the places. So now back here, if I refresh, it should look exactly the same, because now the CSS is not in the Chrome inspector, but it's actually coming from my style sheet. Okay, but what if I would want to use that same hover effect on an item that has a drop-down menu? So if we go back to menus and add the same CTA link class to, sorry, here to the menu item that is a parent menu item. And let's go back here. Now this one, well, it causes a few problems, right? That approach with just changing the background, the padding on the item itself. It basically moves your drop-down menu closer to the menu item. We would need to fix that little icon here. So let me show you a different approach you could take when you would want to style a menu item as a call to action. And for that, I will go back here and do that on on a different item with a different CSS, CTA link to different CSS class. Okay, so let's save that, refresh here. Because targeting the link itself, the thing that we are clicking, is one way, but we could also fake the appearance of a button with a pseudo element. So to do that, we also, the targeting will be similar. So CTA link to first level links inside, and we will add a before pseudo element. So something like CTA link to right caret A, and then before. That's my selector, right? And now when working with pseudo elements, first we have to define the content, empty quotes. So like there's no content, we could have text here, like the pseudo elements are very, very powerful, but for this purpose, when we only want to create a shape of the button behind our link, there's no content needed. We do have to display that, so display block, background light pink. Now position absolute, so that it's, you know, not after or not before the menu item, but behind it. So with position absolute, we can position it relative to the link itself. With let's say to make it as wide as the link, we would use left 0, right 0, but to make it slightly larger, left negative 10 pixels and right negative 10 pixels, height 30 pixels. Okay, now we can see it finally. Let's make it a bit taller, let's say 40. It's covering my menu item, so Z index negative value. Now it's behind it, and the top property, let's write top negative 10 pixel, something like that. Okay, and then border radius 30 pixels. Okay, that looks pretty good. Okay, so you see now I didn't have to change that selector to, like, all the CSS properties I wrote for that before pseudo element, they work correctly, because there is no other CSS anywhere else that targets that that targets that element, right? So everything I just wrote, I created a new thing, new element, so all my CSS properties work right away. And it's as simple as that. Now, a quick question, how do you do the zoom in on the mouse cursor? So I use a little app on my Mac. It's called Cursor Pro, I think. So it gives me that little, oh, you can't even see my cursor, you only see the, 1 second, let me fix that. I didn't even realize that. No, you should see it. Do you see my cursor? I thought I don't see it now. Anyway, you at least see the round thingy. So that gives me the round thingy, and with a little keyboard shortcut I can change it and zoom in for you. So hopefully that works well. Okay, so we've created the same effect with that before pseudo element. Let me copy that CSS right here as well, because what I would also want to do is see how would that apply to menu module, right? Not default navigation. So back here, let's add that to, oh, here we didn't close the bracket. Okay, now that's fine. Let's see how would that CSS class look on the drop-down menu item. So save menu. I've saved my CSS, and now if I refresh here, now that parent uses that, you know, the different approach with pseudo element, and there is no adjustments needed. The submenu is where it was, so further down the page, because there's more padding on the actual link here, and you know, the icon didn't get moved away, so that works better with if you would want to use that call to action style on a link that has a drop-down menus. Now let's add a menu module so that we can see if it works with that as well. Actually, I have a post here. Let's enable Visual Builder on that post. It doesn't really matter if it would work the same way in the theme builder. So here, let me add a menu module. Okay, so it is, I think there's like background here. Let's see if there would be no background. Now you see it works just like that with a menu module as well. The same simple, simple selector that targets, that creates that before pseudo element works with a menu module until, I think, let's check that, until we add a logo here. Let's see if I add sample logo, and let's make it a bit smaller. Yes, so now this is misaligned because when you're working with menu module, you would know that if you are styling submenus, for example, if you're not using an logo image in a menu module, the links will have a minimum, like I think there's like 0 padding at the bottom or very little. But as soon as you add an image, that size of the menu, well, that link has more padding. So to fix that, we would need to just simply adjust that top position or change it to bottom. Unfortunately, it won't work both for the same CSS will not work here for the default nav and here on the menu module, but it's either one or another. We could write multiple like different CSS for the two, but to fix that, we would need to simply change that top position from -12 to 22, something like that. Or basically it would depend on the size of your logo, the the font size, basically the size of your navigation. But it's still pretty simple to achieve. So that's one approach, writing a little bit of CSS. But if you would want to create that type of navigation with a logo and then some links, basically what we have here at the top with our default navigation, let's say I have my logo, which you don't see because it's behind me, but and then a few links and a call to action as the last parent item. How do we do that using a menu module and a button module? So another quick, super simple CSS tip I would want to share for that with you. Let's go back here in the builder. Okay, so let me refresh my page. I don't know why, but just to make sure that it's the latest. Okay, so don't worry about that misaligned call to action. Now let's try to misalign, the thing that we just did. Let's try to do the same thing, but with a button module. Okay, so here that text inside my menu, let's align it to the right. Because if we, let's actually remove that text module from here. If we use a different column structure and try to, I don't know, use this one, and then here a button module, just to make sure that it's visible. Like, it's not going to be directly next to it. Well, we could fake it, but then like there is a lot of tweaking involved. If you ever try to achieve something like that, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. So what I like to do is I would keep the column structure at full width. Okay, so I have just a single column and two modules, and then add, well, usually for a header I would add ID, and that is for many, main reason is when writing your CSS with a use of ID as the one of the parent containers, your CSS, as you already saw with that first example, have more specificity by default. So there would be less things you would need to change afterwards. And after all, your navigation is usually just once on a page, so it is a unique, and then using ID makes complete sense and it helps with when writing CSS. So for a row here or a section, depends, like usually probably a section, but since I'm already inside the builder, let's use a row for that. Let's add ID, something like my header, very original, but okay, something more specific than just a header. Okay, you want to, usually I would use like DL for Divi lover, or just a few letters to make my CSS classes and IDs unique. But okay, my header should be fine as well. And now let's save that, and back in the on the front end, let me show you how we can simply move that next to each other. Okay, so we can use Flexbox. CSS Flexbox is a very powerful CSS layout system. I think, not know the proper name, but basically with Flexbox you can align things, and to align things with Flexbox you have to target the parent container. So in this case I want to align my menu module and my button next to each other, and the parent container, so the thing I need to target to do that with Flexbox, is not a row but a column inside. So my ID is on a div ETPB row with a class row. So on the row I added ID to the row, and inside there is a div with a class ETPB column, and two div containers, one with a module and one with a button. So I want to target that column, ETPB column, which is inside ID my header. So my selector would look like this, ETPB column, that's what I'm targeting, but first a parent element, my header. So my header space, parent-child relationship, right? And then ETPB column, display flex, So right by default, Flex will align everything next to each other. But there's one other thing we would want to do here is to make sure that the module, even when like there's not, even when the links inside don't take up the whole width, we want it to stretch to fill all the space that's left except for the space for the button, right? So, and we can do that with Flex Grow property. So we have to target the menu module, and it uses a class etpb menu. So that's the class I'm going to use, etpb menu. And again, I will define a parent element, my header. So that's why I will, how I will only target menu modules within that row, not everywhere else on my page, because etpb menu is a class that would be used on every menu module, right? I don't want to target all menu modules across the whole website, just that one. So that's why that id my header is needed. And then Flex Grow one, sorry, one, because default is auto or something like that. And you see now it is aligned like the navigation. Let me just make myself tiny smaller. We have our logo, navigation, and then a menu module. Like it looks bad with that. Let's fix that. So this is the CSS I wrote. Let me just comment out the pink, you know, the call to action for that pink before element. Right now there's no CSS other than this flexbox thing that stretches this, and then that is aligned next to it. So to separate the two, we could use a you know, a board, margin on a button itself. So right here in the builder, too many tabs. Okay, so let's make sure this has a left margin. So spacing, margin left, let's say 20 pixels. That's my button, right? Because I want to separate the two. And then here I want to make sure that this doesn't have any margin bottom. So when I will try to align it in the center, there won't be any additional space at the bottom. In the center vertically, I mean. Okay, so back here, refresh the page. Now there is that space. It looks like part of the menu because it's right next to it. Will always, the space will be always the same, the size of the margin I've set in the module settings. And just one last thing to make sure that we're aligning it vertically in the center as well. Let's see, that column, the container that we've used Flexbox, let's try align items center. Yes, that would be the CSS property also needed to make sure that it's aligned in the center here as well. Okay, so just let me add it here, right? Let's exit the builder, refresh the page, and now I have nice looking menu module with a call to action. I'm not sure about the icon. I wouldn't use that hover style because it moves everything, but other than that it works very well. And even on mobile that would also work well up until it doesn't. So here there are a few things we could do. We could make the row a bit wider, right? We could also make sure that my CSS for the Flexbox, it only works like from 400 pixels, for example. And then on a phone, like something like this, that button would be underneath, for example. Well, there's a lot of different things we could do here, but if like the simplest approach would be to wrap that CSS we wrote in a media query. So add media min with, let's say 400 pixels. So if it's more than 400, if the screen width is above 400 pixels, then these two modules will be aligned next to each other. And if not, it goes back to default, and the default is that one is under another. Obviously, here we would also need to remove the margin, right? Make sure that the spacing is correct, basically tweak it a little bit. But I think that should give you a good starting point. And actually, mobile optimization is another topic that was second on the list in our poll. So I think we can get back to it and look at how our call to action, like it's lost here, how it will look in on the mobile menu, right? How we could work with that, different approaches, but also make sure that the item inside our mobile menu also has that different style. If someone opens a menu, there's a call to action there as well. We can do something like that next time. But for today, I have one more question. I know we're closing to 1 hour, but Deshna, I have your question. Let me find that page. So Deshna was working on a footer menu, and she used CSS to make sure that the menu is displayed, vertically on mobile. So if we inspect this page here, the footer menu on the product page, let's inspect. There we are. So here, that menu, because this is using, yes, the menu module, right? So that works correctly for Deshna on the product page, but on the product category page, it doesn't. And it's also a matter of CSS specificity. But the problem is, and if you've ever tried to, style the WooCommerce, WooCommerce create a shop in Divi with WooCommerce. There's lots of things like that require that additional CSS targeting. And the reason for that is Divi loads additional, more specific CSS on custom post type archives. That is why the CSS Deshna that you wrote here, and let's look, where is it? So you have, because just a quick explanation how menu module works. Divi will create a duplicate of the default navigation and put it in the mobile navigation container. That's why we see, 1 second, ET menu, yes, we right here. So this is the ETPB module menu, right? The menu wrapper, and inside we have ETPB menu inner container, okay, bear with me, and here ETPB menu wrap, and then there are two divs, ETPB menu and ET mobile nav menu, and both have ULs with your list items here and also here. So that ETPB menu is displayed on desktop, and then with CSS display none, display block, Divi hides one and shows the other on mobile. We have two separate containers. So here on that page where it works, Deshna is targeting, I'm sure, yes, with ET menu, let's see. Let me just look at your CSS here. Actually, not here. Let's look at the, we want to target the parent container. So ET mobile nav, too many wrappers. Yes, here. So you see, Deshna has W, Y, M, E letters that make it unique. Footer, ET mobile nav menu, display none. So we're hiding the mobile navigation on mobile size, screen size, and that works well. Here on the product page, we have one ID and one class, but here, if we want to find that mobile nav menu, and find -nas CSS, you see the same CSS, the display none no longer works on custom post type archive page. And that's the product category in this case, but it will work the same. It won't work actually just as it doesn't on that product page on any custom post type archive page because of, and we see it here, but again, if you have trouble finding it here through all the different CSS that targets that, you can just scroll through here and find display property, and with that arrow it will highlight the CSS property that's using that's overwriting your code. And in this case, look, we have one ID and 1, 2, 3, 4 CSS classes. So basically either adding additional ID, you see they are using etbog. So if your WYME footer would be inside etbog, that would work, because then you have two IDs and a class. That would make it more specific. And the same goes for desktop menu, which you want to show, right? So you have your footer etpb menu and menu wrap set to display block, but this is also being overwritten by that CSS that uses 4 classes and 1 ID. So yes, I hope that's helpful. Okay, so if all that CSS seemed a little too much, please don't feel frustrated. I know, like, there's a lot of whenever you try to find a tutorial on how to achieve something in Divi, usually it involves CSS. So I think that being familiar and being able to do that type of troubleshooting, that type of little styling as I just showed you today, I think learning CSS will make working with Divi much easier for you. So 1 second, let me look at the comments. Brett says, header and footers always seem like a mystery to me. This demo just proves the case. It seems I need a 1-year class covering just headers and footers with CSS. Thank you for providing extra information. So, Brett, I have a good news for you. Because I wanted to let you know that my free 5-day CSS challenge will be happening soon. We haven't set the date yet, but it's going to be sometime next month for sure. And it's 5 days of video lessons, fun assignments, and live Q&A sessions, all focused on teaching you CSS fundamentals and how to define your selector, how to target things in Divi, and also how to do all that while working with Divi. We go over Chrome Inspector, basically all what I did today. We are dividing it in 5 daily lessons. So if that sounds interesting, let me bring this up. Make sure, yeah, it's here. Bring this up and you can only see me. So yes, at cssdivilover.com you will be able to sign up so you don't miss it. We'll be announcing the start date soon. Okay, so that would be all from me for today. I had fun. I hope this was helpful. I can't wait for the next one. Do let me know your thoughts in the comments. I think next time we are going to look into that mobile version, maybe still work on that call to actions inside your mobile menus. But if you have any questions that you would like me to cover, I'm all ears. And yes, thanks again for joining me live. Enjoy the rest of your week. Bye bye.